Hello, so I'm back talking about Lambda again. I've got this text namespace, or module if you like, and I've got a bunch of functions in there which I'd like to introduce to you one at a time. So here we go. So this first function is called substrings, and we call it text.substrings, like that. And we pass into the first parameter in the first set of parentheses, we pass the length of the substrings that we want to return. And then in the second set of parentheses, we pass the string from which we want to return the substrings. So the way it works is we've got a lambda function with a single parameter length, and that returns another lambda function with a single parameter string. And if you recall from my other video, putting a lambda that returns a lambda is called currying. So we are currying this function so we can put the parameters into separate sets of parentheses like these, which gives us lots of options, but you should watch that video to figure out why. So essentially it uses the mid string sequence, which you've probably seen before, that splits a string into substrings of a given length. So this is how it works. Let's have a look at it. So let's just paste this in here. You can see that that has split the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog into substrings of length 1. And if I pull it over like this, we can see that this is length 2. We've got length 5 here and length 9 here. So that's text.substrings. So this next function is text.characters, and it's very, very simple. And in fact, it's so simple, and the reason why we used currying in the previous function is so that we could define text.characters with a single line, and it just calls text.substrings1 and then returns the substrings of length 1 from the string, which of course is just the characters of the string. So that is done like this, and this is, even though the formatting on that cell is bad, that's returned the characters from the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. That is text.characters. Okay, moving onwards, we've got this function called text.LISTCONTAINS. And this uses currying again. In this case, we are searching for whether an item exists in a list or not. And it's a very simple function. It just uses not, isError, and xmatch to test if an item is within a list. And if it is in the list, it returns true. And if it's not, it returns false. I've got a couple of examples here. So the first one is testing if the text 5 exists in this quick brown fox text, and that is of course false. And this next one is testing if the number 10 exists in the sequence of 9, and of course it's false. And in a simple example, this returns true because of course the number 10 is in the sequence of 11 integers. So that is text.LISTCONTAINS. So this next function is called text.isParenthesis, and what this does is it tests if a single character is a parenthesis, open or close, or not. And if it is a parenthesis, then it returns true, and if it's anything else, it returns false. So the way that it works is it takes a single parameter, which is the character. First we make sure that there is just one character, and if there is more than one character or fewer than one characters, then it returns a value error. Otherwise, we set this char variable to be the character. And then we test whether the code of that character is between 40 and 41, which of course are the open and close parentheses, and we return true if that condition is true, and false otherwise. So this is how it works. It's super simple. And that's of course true. That one is false because that's a curly brace, and that one is a bracket, so that's false, and that one's true because that is a closed parenthesis. So that's text.isParenthesis. So this next function is text.isBracket, and it works similar to the isParenthesis one, except instead of testing for brackets, we're testing, instead of testing for parentheses, we're testing for these 4 characters, which are the curly and square brackets. And we're using text.LISTCONTAINS to test if the character passed into the function is in that list of codes. So it then returns true if it is and false otherwise, because that's what text.LISTCONTAINS does, if you recall. So we can use it like this. If I just drag it across, you'll see that it's true for these bracket characters and false for the parentheses. So that's text.isBracket. This function is text.isSpace, and it works exactly like text.isBracket, but instead of the 4 characters that we had previously, it's got 32 and 160, which represent a normal space and a non-breaking space. So we're using text.LISTCONTAINS to check if the character passed into the function exists in that list. And if it does, it returns true, and if it doesn't, well, it doesn't. So it's really simple. And actually the main reason I wrote this was to test for the existence of these non-breaking spaces, because they can kind of trip people up when using them. So using this function makes that super easy. So it returns true because this one contains a normal space and this one contains a non-breaking space. You can see that I've put this equals char 160 here to insert the non-breaking space into G1. So that function is text.isSpace. This next function is text.isNumber, and it works very similar to the text.isParenthesis. We're checking for a code between 48 and 57, which of course are the numeric codes. So this is really simple. I'm not going to spend too long on it. We'll just put that there and that. And you can see that it returns a value error because this is 2 characters. Remember, it needs to be 1 character. This is false because that's an A, and this is true because that's a 2. And this will work whether that character is a text representation of 2 or formatted as a 2 in the cell. So that's the important differentiation between this and the built-in Excel functions. So that's text.isNumber. The next function is actually very similar. This time we're checking to see if the text is a letter or not. So it works in a similar way. We first convert it to an uppercase to make sure that we're only checking for 26 codes instead of 52. And well, it's not very complicated, so I'm just going to demonstrate what it does. So it returns an error if there are more than 1 characters in the cell. It returns true if it's a letter, and it returns false if it's anything else. Simple as that. So that's text.isLetter. So this next function is called text.WHERE, and it takes 2 parameters. The string, which is some string that we want to test for some condition, and then an arbitrary function, which is a lambda function that tests a single character for meeting some condition or not. And that function should return, it should take a single parameter, which is a character, and it should return true or false after testing that character for some quality. Okay, and what we do here is we pass text.characters of the string, so we convert the string into its single character array, and then we apply the function to each of those characters. So the result of text.where is an array that has as many elements as the string is long of true and false values, where the value is true if the function has returned true for that character, and it's false if it hasn't. So the best way to show you how it works is to just give an example. So here we are using isSpace as the function to test each of the characters in this string. And you can see that the 4th position is true because the 4th character in the string is a space. And in this example, we are testing to see if the character is an O or not. And you can see that this one is true because the O in brown is in the same position in that string as this true is in this array. So why I created this will become clear in just a moment, but that is text.where. This next function is called text.remove, and the purpose of this function is to remove characters from a string that meet some arbitrary condition. And the way this works is we pass the string and a function that tests the characters in that string. You can see here that we're using text.where to test the string with the characters. So what happens is that returns an array of true and false. We then convert them, we kind of invert them, and then we filter the characters to only return those values that did not meet the condition. So it then joins them back together and it returns the string. So let's take an example of text.remove with isSpace. So we've passed the string in F1 as the first parameter and the function text.isSpace as the second parameter. Text.where has then returned an array of true and false, where if the element is a space, then it's true and otherwise it's false. Not converts it to if the element is not a space, it's true, and otherwise it's false. And filter then removes the spaces from the string, and we join them back together and return them to the spreadsheet. So you can see that text.remove with text.isSpace has removed the spaces from the sentence. Now the great thing I like about this is that this function can be as complicated or as simple as you like. We can change it and make it really, really complex to remove very, very detailed conditions of characters from strings. So that's text.remove. So this next function is called text.get, and it actually does the opposite of text.remove. So we pass it a function and it returns the characters or the string, the substring from the string that meets the conditions of that function. So in this example, I'm using text.get with text.isNumber to return the numbers from the string. So the string has this plus at the beginning, it's got some dashes in it, and I just want the numbers. So I'm using text.get f1 and then the function text.isNumber. Now just to reiterate, this is kind of a simple example, and I'm sure you could do this in other ways in Excel, but the purpose of text.get is to allow you to pass an arbitrary function, which can be as complicated as you want it to be, to remove and ultimately return values from a text string. So that is text.get. So the next function is super simple. I'm hoping to talk about it very, very quickly. So it's text.reverse, and it reverses a text string. It's as simple as that. So I won't go into the detail of how it works. You can figure it out for yourself. But essentially, it just reverses whatever you give it. And that's the end of that. That's text.reverse. Okay, so things are getting interesting now. In this next function, we have text.LTRIM. And what that does is it takes a list of characters that you want to remove from the left side of a string. So let me show you some examples before we talk about how it works. So this one is using saying remove the plus string from the left of whatever's in G1. So it has done that, it's removed the plus from the left. That's a super simple example. You may want to just use left instead of, or right instead of doing that. But the point of the function is to be able to remove more than one character from the left of a string. So in this example, I'm saying remove all the asterisks, all the dashes, and all the commas from the left of the string. And you can see that it's removed them and returned the remainder of the string. So the way that this works is we've got a lambda function that takes two parameters, remove, which is a string that includes the characters that you want to remove from the left of the string in the from parameter. We first convert both into character arrays using text.characters. And then we use the reduce function where the initial accumulated value is the from string, and we iterate over the characters in the from string. And the function that we use to process at each iteration is this lambda, where we first take the leftmost character from the accumulated value. So that's the leftmost character from the from string, or rather the accumulator, and we test if that character is in the character array of characters to remove. So that's why we had text.LISTCONTAINS from earlier. So if we determine whether that character is a removal character or not, if it is a removal character, we use the replace function to replace the first character with an empty string, which is essentially the same as removing it. We use replace instead of substitute to make sure that we only remove the first character. That becomes the accumulator for the next iteration, such that when we come around again and we take the leftmost character of the accumulated value, it is the next character in the from string, which is then tested against the characters to remove. And this continues until the leftmost character is out of sync with the from array. Trust me, it works. It's kind of difficult to explain, but essentially it works, and the net result is that it stops when it finds a character that is not in the list of characters to remove, and that's why we get this LTRIM effect. So that is text.LTRIM. The next function is text.RTRIM, which trims characters in the same way as LTRIM, but this time from the right-hand side of the string. Now, the simplest way to do this is to just reverse the string and use text.LTRIM to do the removal. So that's what it did. You pass your character string which contains the removals. You pass the string from which you want to remove characters. We first reverse the string, and then we apply the LTRIM function to the reverse string, and then we reverse the result and return the result. And it's really as simple as that. So let's just look at the examples. That doesn't do anything because there are no pluses at the end of the string. And this one removes the commas, the dashes, and the asterisks from the right-hand side of the string. So that's text.rtrim. Okay, so this final function is text.trim, and you can see the way that it works here. I've got some text in G1, and I've used text.trim, and I'm asking it to remove the asterisk, the dash, and the commas from the text in G1. And because I've omitted the third parameter, it has defaulted to both, which means to say use LTRIM and RTRIM on this text to remove those characters from the beginning and the end. In this example, I've used the word leading, which removes the characters from the beginning, which is to say that it uses LTRIM. This is using the word trailing, which is to say that it removes the characters from the end, i.e. it uses RTRIM. And this uses the word both, just to show you that using the word both is the same as omitting the third parameter. The way that it works is like this. We've got three parameters: remove, from, and position, which is optional. If position is omitted, we use the word both. Otherwise, we use whatever was passed to position, and we convert it to lowercase. And then the result is based on the value of this position variable. So if it's both, we perform rtrim on the string, and we perform ltrim on the result. If it's leading, we perform ltrim on the string, and if it's trailing, we perform rtrim on the string. And if the position variable is anything else, we return a value error because somebody's passed the wrong kind of text into this position argument. And then ultimately we return this result to the worksheet. And that is how rtrim works, and that is the end of the video.